everyone. I'm Brandon. I am an instructor with LSATMax. Thank you for joining me today. Today we are having ourselves a little bit of a presentation about the writing sample on the LSAT. That is one of the unscored sections on the LSAT. It tends to be a bit of a mystery to people. And so today we are here to demystify it. Before I get into our presentation, however, let me just make a few announcements. So first of all, if you have not heard of it, please check out our podcast that I host with my much better half, Yelena War. It's called The Legal Level. It's available on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, and from what I've heard, where you're listening right now, there's a link that has just popped up in the chat box, and so you can have a look at that. I hope you'll join us. We have some new episodes that are going to drop very soon. I'd also like to tell you about next week's presentation. We're going to have a presentation next week that's going to be about how to read like a lawyer, which is going to help you with reading comprehension and also with logical reasoning. So that will be next week. Again, there is a link in the chat box that just popped up right now, so go ahead and have a look at that. That's the housekeeping for today. And so like I was talking about, we are going to be talking about the writing sample, and I have a presentation that we've made and that I would like to share with you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you. Oh, by the way, so this presentation, if you've been checking in with these, you've probably seen me give presentations before. This one calls for participation, I think even more than other presentations have called for participation. What we're going to be doing doesn't take any expertise with the LSAT or anything like that. So hopefully this one will be fun. But the way that you can participate best is if you would like to raise your hand. I think it's in the participants box. If you raise your hand, I can call on you and you can talk to the everybody else here just like me. Or you can type the answers that I'm going to ask for into the chat box. However, with this many people, I think there's 78 attendees right now. Stuff tends to race by in the chat box, and so I might miss some of that. The last thing is that there's a question and answer box. At the end of this presentation, I'm happy to answer your questions on the writing sample or on other questions about the LSAT and law school admissions. So if you have a question that you'd like to wait for the end, just go ahead and type it into the chat box. So that said, let me share my screen. That would be under Zoom, which we all spend our entire lives on now. Share content, start broadcast. And that appears to be working. So here is our presentation, the writing sample on the LSAT. So if you have been studying for the LSAT, what you will know is that the LSAT is a multiple choice test of logic and argumentation. Most of the exam, the stuff that is scored, all has to do with that. It's multiple choice. The writing sample, let me just talk about where it fits into the LSAT overall. So this is the LSAT, the normal LSAT. If you are taking the LSAT anytime between now and July, you'll be doing an lsat-flex, and I'll talk to you in a second about what the lsat-flex is. The lsat-flex is a take-home because having people gather in public, taking exams has been difficult since coronavirus, and so things have changed a little bit. I'm hoping that by August, they will go back to the normal LSAT, but we'll see. But the normal LSAT is 6 35-minute sections, 4 of which are scored. The scored sections are 2 logical reasoning sections. Again, you guys probably know about this stuff already, but logical reasoning is where you'll get 24 to 26 questions. Each has a little paragraph that you're asked about. Usually there's an argument in the paragraph, and they'll ask you about what's going on in the argument. There's 1 section of reading comprehension that's scored. You'll get 4 passages to read, and you'll be asked questions, usually somewhere between 5 and 8 questions per passage. There is a section of logic games, which is what tends to terrify students. Logic games will give you a little fictional situation, like runners running a race, and they will give you some rules that govern that situation, and then they will ask you about how the rules apply to that situation. Even though it doesn't look like law school, it's still testing something that's important to law school, which is applying rules to facts. That's how you get your score on test day. Also on test day, on the normal LSAT, there's what's called the experimental section, which is just an extra one of these 3 types of sections. You might get 1 extra logical reasoning, 1 extra reading comp, 1 extra logic games, just one of them. And what that is that the makers of the LSAT are testing out questions that do not count on your LSAT, but that will count on future LSATs. And so they're just seeing how students respond to them. That's what you do on test day. Then there's the writing sample. The writing sample is now a take-home. And regardless of lsat-flex, which I'll talk about in a second, or whether you're taking the normal LSAT, you don't take it on the same day at the same time you take the LSAT. Instead, you take it at home on your desktop or laptop computer, and it is one 35-minute section. We're going to talk about that section in detail, but before we do that, let me just, for anybody who has been living under an LSAT rock, let me just tell you what the LSAT-flex is. The LSAT-flex is, like I said, up through July. All of the LSATs are LSAT-flex. They are take-home exams. The LSAT-flex is a little bit different in that there is no experimental section, and there is only 1 section of logical reasoning. And so on test day, you just have 3 short sections, well, 3 35-minute sections. And then the writing sample is still a part of it, but it's still done at a different time. And you can do it within 1 year of taking the exam. So that's the difference between the LSAT-flex and the normal LSAT. The normal LSAT is taken on a tablet at a testing center. LSAT-flex is taken at home on a laptop or a desktop computer. So the writing sample, what is it? Why is it there? The writing sample is actually the only piece of the LSAT that tests your ability to do the kind of exams that you're going to do in law school. Even though the LSAT is a multiple choice exam, the vast majority of the exams that you take in law school will be essays. And they'll actually be argumentative essays. And what happens is that they'll give you a fact pattern, by which I mean a situation. They'll tell you if you're in your torts class, which is people suing each other for getting injured. That's what torts is. They'll give you a fact pattern that'll be like, people get in a car accident or something like that. And they'll give you a bunch of different facts about that car accident. And you have to write out the arguments that plaintiff would make about that car accident, the arguments that defendant would make about that car accident. And very often you're going to have to make the determination of which one of them should win between plaintiff or defendant. That's nothing like the LSAT, which is multiple choice. Obviously you don't know the law yet, so they can't ask you to apply the law in the writing sample, but they're still asking you to write an argumentative essay. And it is something that kind of matches up with what's going on with those law school essays. And so here is how it is structured. We're going to do one. Obviously, you can see it on the screen. You might have started reading through it already. But what always happens, the way the prompt is always structured, is that there will be a person or an organization that's trying to decide between 2 courses of action. It is your job to decide which of those courses of action they should take, to argue for that course of action, and to argue against the other course of action. In a sense, the organization or the individual in the fact pattern is your client. So you're going to make the decision for them, which of those options to take, and then you're going to make the arguments that the option you're choosing is better than the other option. And there are a couple of ways to do that. What's important is that your client is going to have 2 very specific criteria that the decision should meet. And so you're not just making the argument that this, that the option that you're choosing is better in general. Instead, you must make these specific arguments that the option you're choosing is better on both of those criteria. Now, what we're going to find as we do this fact pattern is that they'll make it a little bit hard to decide. They give you 2 options, they give you 2 criteria, and usually what happens is that one option is better for one criterion, and the other option is better for the other criterion. And so it makes you feel like you just want to split it down the middle. Or you want to argue that, hey, if you like criterion 1, you should do this. Or if you like criterion 2, you should do that. If you argue it that way, you have failed the writing sample. Instead, you must argue that your option, even if it doesn't feel like it, fits both criteria better. I forgot to tell you how the writing sample factors into your application process. So let me just say that really quickly before we get to this particular example. The writing sample is not graded. It does not enter into your score. It's not like edited or marked upon. Instead, whatever you write is sent on to the schools that you apply to without comment. And the schools can do with it whatever they like. I think most of them read it. I happen to think it's one of the less important parts of your application package. Your personal statement essay, when it comes to your writing, I think is more important. They care about that. One thing that I think they use the personal statement for, above and beyond seeing whether or not you can just do a law school essay, is to make the determination of whether or not you actually wrote your personal statement. So if your personal statement is Shakespeare and Chaucer combined, and your writing sample, you can barely put 2 words together, they're going to know that somebody else wrote your personal statement. And so I think that is, although nobody ever says it, I think that's one of the reasons why the writing sample is there, or at least one of the ways that schools use the writing sample is to compare it with your personal statement. They want to know that you wrote your personal statement because it's personal. So that's that. That's how it's used. Again, doesn't enter into your score, is not graded, is not commented upon, is sent to the schools that you're interested in, and that's it. All right, so like I was saying, the way the writing sample works is that you have this fact pattern. You are the counselor, you have a client, you must give your client sage advice. And so the way that the rest of this presentation is going to go is we're going to read this fact pattern here, and then we're going to work through an analysis, how we would decide which is the better option to go with. And even though there's no right answer, it's not like option 1 is right or option 2 is right. You should take some time to think about which option can I make more and better arguments for. And also, which option can I smack down the hardest? And the one that you can smack down the hardest is probably the one you don't want to go with. There's always 2 ways to look at things. I'm bolstering my position, I'm attacking the other position, and we have to do both of those. So here's how this is going to go. I'm going to start reading through this, but then I'm not going to read through the whole thing. I'm probably going to get down to that, the national, well, let me just start reading and then I'll ask for what I'm asking for. So here's what this looks like. This is a real, I think it's the June 2007 LSAT. This is a real writing sample prompt from the June 2007 LSAT. And it looks like this. BLZ Stores, an established men's clothing retailer with a chain of stores in a major metropolitan area, is selecting a plan for expansion. Using the facts below, write an essay in which you argue for one of the following plans over the other based on the following 2 criteria. The company wants to increase its profits. The company wants to ensure its long-term financial stability. Easy enough. So note, these are the instructions right here. Argue for one of the following plans over the other based on these 2 criteria. That is the entirety of the instructions. So make sure you do that. Argue for one over the other. Use the criteria. The criteria, the company wants to increase profits. The company wants to ensure its long-term financial stability. So if you'll notice, each of these paragraphs is talking about a plan, a national plan and a regional plan. And so this is where I'm going to start asking for your help, which is I'm going to go through first this first paragraph, and we're going to determine what are the good facts in that first paragraph and what are the bad facts. And remember, what we care about is that the plan will increase this company's profits. That's our first criterion. And ensure long-term financial stability. That's the second criterion. So now let me read to you about the national plan, and then you guys tell me what's good about it, including what's good about it with regard to which criterion, and we will mark it up accordingly. So the national plan is to open a large number of men's clothing stores throughout the country over a short period of time. In doing this, the company would incur considerable debt. It would also have to greatly increase staff and develop national marketing and distribution capabilities. Many regional companies that adopted this strategy increased their profits dramatically. A great number tried and failed, suffering severe financial consequences. BLZ is not well known outside its home area. Research indicates that BLZ The BLZ name is viewed positively by those who know it. National clothing chains can offer lower prices because of their greater buying power. BLZ currently faces increasingly heavy competition in its home region from such chains. All right, so that's our first plan. So now let's talk about, first of all, what are the pros of this plan? And let me ask you specifically, what are the pros of this plan with regard to increasing the company's profits? And so you tell me, you can raise your hand, or you can type it in the chat box. I'm watching. Anybody want to tell me what's good? Or maybe let's just make it easier. What is good about this plan? What are our positive facts? All right, I see a few raised hands. Amber, you want to unmute yourself and tell us what's going on here? What's good about this plan? Maybe I can unmute you. Or maybe I can't. All right, Amber, I'm trying to unmute you. It's not letting me. I don't know if you can unmute yourself. Otherwise, I think I'm going to have to move on. Yeah, I don't know why it won't let me unmute you. I'm sorry. Let me try Rachel. Rachel, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I can.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. Great, thanks. So the positive aspects that I see in this national plan are, first of all, it would increase staff, so give jobs to people. They're saying they're going to develop national marketing, so that's a positive aspect, and distribution capabilities, exactly. So those are and they're saying that this would increase the profits dramatically. So those are the positive aspects of this national plan, in my opinion.
Great. I do see that this strategy has increased profits dramatically for other people, so it has a record of success, which I think is good. So Rachel, thank you for that. I would say that sometimes there are facts that can cut both ways. And so when I see the fact that Rachel pointed out that it would increase staff and develop national marketing and distribution capabilities, I think that is probably a good fact for increasing profits eventually, but it is also a big expenditure. And so sometimes a fact can be used in one way, in making one argument, and in another way. So I think that's a good fact. How about someone else? All right, I see lots of hands up. How about, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Geronda? Do you want to unmute yourself and let us know what's good about this plan?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Yes, okay. So I also think that by them offering lower prices because they have a greater buying power, that might be a profit, a plus in increasing profits as well.
Great, so I think that's a very good fact. If we can offer lower prices because of our buying power, we're more likely to get people through the door. So that seems like that would be a great way to increase profit. So I think that's a good one. How about anybody else? Are there other positives here? Let's see, let me ask. Is it Nellie? Do you want to put your hand up? Unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hello.
So this is gonna maybe derail a bit, but I would never approach this that way. I mean, I think that each plan has its pluses and minuses, and the two goals should be taken into account. But I would have suggested that you do the national plan on a lower, a less intense basis, so that you keep the risk lower, and that you invest some in the regional business so that you can also increase jobs. Can you do that, or do you have to do one or the other?
You must do one or the other. So
really?
That is, yes. And so what I would say to this is that you are making the case that you can be a proponent. And a lot of times you're going to end up taking clients if you're a lawyer, and there will be bad facts, but you can't split the baby between what's good about your client and what's bad about your client. And so you have to take the facts that you're given, and if you are given bad facts, you have to downplay them. And if you are given good facts, you have to play them up. And so I understand the desire to do that, but I also think that that would be to fail to follow the directions. So I would not do that.
Okay, thanks.
My pleasure. All right, so I think we've got a couple of goods. Now let's talk about the bads. What stinks about this national plan? So let's see, how about Christopher? I'm gonna allow you to talk. Christopher, do you have stuff that's bad about this plan? Or if you still have good things you wanna talk about this plan, we can talk about that too.
Well, Branden, one positive thing that wasn't mentioned is research indicates that the BLZ name is viewed positively by those who know it. Word of mouth, social media, things like that today, things catch on very quickly. So I think that's a positive thing too. But what I see as a very big negative here is that it says that many regional companies have adopted this strategy and increased their profits dramatically. But I believe this is kind of like the next sentence adds on. It says a greater number have tried and failed, suffering severe financial consequences. And BLZ is not well known outside its home area. Right there, Branden, I mean, to me, that's saying that this is really, this is like going to Vegas and rolling the dice.
It is a dangerous plan, isn't it?
It's a dangerous plan, Branden. I totally agree. You know, in the bottom line, it says BLZ currently faces increasingly heavy competition in its home region from the chains, from its competition. There's a couple of real negatives here with this national plan. I would argue against it, Branden. That's my opinion. I'm not a professional. I was a pipe fitter in my life.
Well, let's get you to be a professional lawyer very soon.
Right on, Branden.
Thanks for participating. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and so I think this is a dangerous plan. We haven't quite looked at the regional plan yet, but there are definitely some things that are worrisome here. And so we'll have to consider that. I know that, what is the old saying, high risk, high reward? We'll have to think about it. Maybe the risk is worth the reward. All right. I see maybe one or two more bad facts and maybe one more good fact. So does anybody else want to tell me about good facts, bad facts? How about Willie? I'm going to let you talk. You want to unmute yourself, Willie, and let us know what you think?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. So I, my hand was raised because I kind of agree with Christopher in the sense that there are a lot of rolling the dice type facts. But I was looking at the research indicates the BLZ name, like you said earlier, with another fact that can kind of be a positive or a negative, like it can go either way, in my opinion. Yeah. The fact that BLZ is not well known outside its home area, to me, doesn't indicate that it can't be. You know, if they do decide to branch out nationally, and because it does get those positive views within its market, who's to say that it wouldn't, you know, in another market or international market, or, you know, if they decide to go with this plan. So, but again, that's like another rolling the dice type situation.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you've pointed out something that's important and that I think can help you stand out from the competition, even in this situation where it's just the writing sample, which is a less important part of your application package, which is that you can make reasonable inferences from the information that they give you. And so I don't think you have to just say only what is in the fact pattern and nothing else. But if, you know, BLZ has been able to garner a very positive image for itself, then I think you can talk about, you know, how they've done that. You know, perhaps they've used social media to their advantage, and social media is something that you can scale up nationally, you know, fairly easily. And so I think you can use reasonable inferences, and I think that's a great way to look at it. So thank you for that. let me say one thing about the opposite of that, which is unreasonable inferences. So long ago, when I first started teaching the LSAT, I was working through with a class that I was teaching a different writing sample. And it was about a woman who's trying to decide whether or not to go on a national tour. She's a musician, or to go on a regional tour in her hometown. And so I was talking about reasonable inferences, and one of my students said, one of the negatives of going on it was an international tour. I'm sorry, international tour. One of the negatives of going on the international tour was that this person might die in a plane crash. And I thought, well, fair enough, but I think that's a little bit far afield from what we're talking about here. And so I think when you start to get that far away from the facts in the fact pattern, you're probably not helping yourself. But reasonable inferences, I think, can show that you're thinking critically and not just regurgitating the information on the page. So that's great. And thank you, Willie. I appreciate that. All right. So I think we've gotten most of the good and bad facts. I would just point out, we're going to incur considerable debt doing this. That could hurt our long-term financial stability. Excuse me. But I would also note that it's a short period of time, and so hopefully the risk would not be that bad. Maybe we could recoup what's going on here fairly quickly. So that's the national plan. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Now let's take a look at the regional plan. So the regional plan is to increase the number and size of stores in the company's home region and upgrade their facilities, product quality, and service. I'm sorry, who is still unmuted? Christopher, I think you're still unmuted. So can you mute yourself? I don't think I can mute you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. This could be achieved for the most part with existing cash reserves. These upgrades would generally increase the prices that BLZ charges. In one trial store in which such changes were implemented, sales and profits have increased. The local population is growing. BLZ enjoys strong customer loyalty. Regional expansion could be accomplished primarily using BLZ's experienced and loyal staff, and would allow continued reliance on known and trusted suppliers, contractors, and other businesses. All right, so now let's do the same thing here. So who wants to tell me what they think is good about this plan? You can raise your hand. Let's see, I don't know how long these hands have been raised, but let me, let's see here. Why do I just have chat? For some reason now I can't let anybody talk. I've been muted by host, I've been unmuted by host. Now I can allow people to talk. All right, Betsy, I am going to allow you to talk. Hopefully you were not just raising your hand about the last paragraph. Betsy, what do you like about this regional plan? I think you'll have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
I can, hello.
Okay, great. It's basically, I was going to type it out, but I read the bottom where BLZ experienced a loyal staff and would allow continued reliance on known and trusted suppliers, contractors, and other business connections. Would be a positive.
This plan is safe.
Yes, it is. Very safe.
And in this day and age, we all like safe, don't we? We're kind of tired of unsafe. So yeah, I see we have experienced and loyal staff. We can continue to rely upon them. We don't have to move into other markets and be relying on other people. So to me, that might help us with long-term financial stability, I think. How about anyone else? The regional plan. Let's see. Let me go with Ron. I'm going to allow you to talk. Ron, do you want to unmute yourself and you can tell us what you like about the regional plan or what you don't like?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
I can.
Perfect. Yeah, so a couple things that I like about this plan. One, it allows you the option of increasing the number and size of the stores while upgrading the facilities, products, and services. So the advantage of that is that as you start expanding from a regional potentially into a national plan down the road, You can perfect your store setups, your layouts, so that you have good consistency. You can, because it's regional and you have a good strong backing from your constituents, your clientele anyway, then the advantage is that, you know, things that work well, you'll know. Things that don't work quite as well, you'll know. So you can make adjustments as you move out. Obviously, they have everything is off of the same our existing cash reserves, so they're not going into debt or not increasing their liabilities in the process of doing it. And even though the prices will change because it's a specialized store, then I think a lot of that will increase for you. And obviously, with the history, since changes have been implemented, the sales and profits have increased due to customer loyalty. So, and of course, obviously, another advantage is population's growing, so increased likelihood of additional customers.
Well, I see lots of green here. All right, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Green. Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, bad facts. Are there any? Are we all risk averse here? I think there might be a bad fact or two, at least with regard to what we want to do with our two criteria. So how about, I'm gonna let Abigail talk. Abigail, do you want to tell us maybe if there's anything bad about this or what you like? You may have to unmute yourself. Did I lose Abigail? I think I have lost Abigail. Let me ask then, how about Tatiana? Can you unmute yourself?
Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm well.
Thank you so much, by the way, for holding. This is amazing. So actually, you know what? I was going to talk about the positives. I don't really see. Let's see.
You can talk about the positives.
Yeah, because, well,
I'm thinking about the negatives. I'll do that for you.
So, you know, because the company wants to increase profits. I mean, that's one of the criteria. And so I think focusing on that, you know, you can see that, for example, as Ron was saying, they don't really have to go into much debt because they can use their existing cash reserves already. So, and then, you know, also they talk about increasing prices, which is actually a positive as well. So I don't really, yeah, I mean, they enjoy strong customer loyalty. I mean, yeah, I think this regional plan sounds much better to me.
All right. I think we're all leaning toward the regional plan.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Tatiana.
You're very welcome.
One negative that I see, which I guess if you're the one charging the price, maybe you would think is a positive, is I think increasing prices is not great. Because you might drive away some people with those price increases. However, it seems like this regional plan is pretty safe compared to the national plan. So I think we've done a pretty good job of looking at these. Now what we need to do, and we'll try to move through this quickly, is to just marshal our arguments here. So, and this is where, so I think we're all deciding that the regional plan is the easier one to argue for. That's fair enough. And I think if we want to take on the regional plan, then I think we can do that. But again, and I just want to make the point here, is that what you're not being graded on, but what you're being judged on is just your ability to make the arguments. And so if you can make the argument that the national plan is better, then I think it's perfectly fine to do that. And it may be more fun to do that than it is to do the regional plan. So let's start talking specifically about each one of these. So hopefully I may have to shift back and forth between this stuff. But here's how you organize your thoughts. So I think you read through quickly like we've done, and then I think you can just write out a little chart like this, and you can marshal your thoughts. And once you have decided what's good and what's bad about each of these plans, then we can move on and decide what to do. I think what we're going to find is that some of those things that we thought were great, maybe we can find some, or some of the things that we thought weren't so good, maybe we can find some arguments for them. So national plan, first of all, why is the national plan better than the regional plan, specifically when it comes to increasing profits? So let's look here. You tell me, why would that be better? Why would it achieve that better? And there are some hands up. Let's see, I'm just going to be choosing, how about, okay, I think I'm clicking on Wendy. Wendy, do you want to tell me why the national plan would be better, specifically when it comes to increasing profits? Can you give me the pros?
Yes, well, one of the pros, well, is definitely because we were just talking about the regional doing increases, whereas the national clothing can offer lower prices because of their greater buying power. And so I think that's a huge thing, because if we're focusing on profit, then we want to know that the profit margin will be greater.
So I think we're dealing in volume here, which might make us some profit. So I think that's a very good one. So thank you for that. I also see, and I did not see this anywhere with the regional plan, that this strategy has not just allowed people at times to increase their profits, and the regional plan could do that. It has worked at one store. Instead, there have been times when this has gone gangbusters. And so here I would be saying, well, look, this has been dramatic in the past. Not so with that other plan. I think that's one thing.
Brandon, I had a question for, would we add that considering the next sentence? Because I was thinking about that, but I wasn't sure.
What do you mean considering the next sentence? A greater
Well, it says a greater number
have
have tried and failed, right? And suffered severe financial consequences. So even though when they adopted it, it increased their profits dramatically, then right after it says a greater number have tried and failed and suffered severe financial consequences. So just your thoughts.
Yeah, so what we would do is eventually we would choose one or the other of these plans. And if we ended up choosing the national plan, then we would put that fact up at the very top, that it increased profits dramatically. And then I'm actually going to talk about how the structure of an effective essay in a little bit. And you always want to, part of making your case is to minimize the bad facts.
Okay.
And so that is a bad fact that you would want to address at some point. You would address it farther down in the essay, but yes. And so I think what we have to do is we have to put on the hat of advocate, which is, sure, this has failed before, but we're not like the people who have failed. Instead, we're the ones who are going to succeed. And I think that's where you can start talking about actually some of the facts elsewhere, like, look, we're already very successful in our hometown. So maybe some people have failed. Well, you know what? They just didn't know how to do business. We already know how to do business. So we will succeed where they fail. That's how I think you would address something like that.
Thank you for that.
My pleasure. Thank you. All right. So we talked about buying power. So I think we've got that. Now let's talk about the cons when it comes to the national plan, specifically when it comes to profits. So who wants to tell me why this plan would ruin our profits? What are the cons? And let's see here. I'm going to, how about Devin? I'm going to let you talk. Do you want to tell us what are the cons of the national plan? Why it won't help us increase our profits? I think you have to unmute yourself. Devin? No. All right, we are having technical difficulties. Let me go with, how about Jessica? Jessica, do you want to tell me what are the cons with the national plan with regard to increased profits? Why is this going to just blow a hole in our profits? Did I click on you? I thought I did. Oh man. Zoom. You're not being cool today. All right. we're actually kind of moving very slowly through this. So I'm going to give a couple of my pros and cons as we go through this. I'll try to bring you guys in a little bit. So the cons, when it comes to profits, why are we in trouble? And again, right now, we're not saying we're on one side or the other. We're just marshaling the different arguments so we can decide which side we want to choose. So here, I see BLZ is not well known outside its home area, which I think means that we're going to have a hard time breaking through in these markets. And I think that can be a con for the national plan, not just on here, but with regard to criterion 2 as well, stability. We are not well known. It's going to be very hard to break through. There's competitors out there. People know us in our market. We're going to go into another market and we're not going to make any money because everybody's already with their particular store that they like to shop at. So I think that's a problem. I also think that the fact that a greater number of people have tried and failed means this is a very risky situation. So this is likely to fail, at least if history is a guide. So I think that's not great. I think there's more that we could do here, but let's try to get out a few other things here. Now we're going to talk about the pros and cons with regard to stability. And this is where the national plan is really dangerous. And this is where there are a lot of cons. And so this is where probably most people who did this threw up their hands and said, I'm not going with the national plan, because stability is out the door with this national plan. But if you decide to be courageous and to choose the national plan to argue, again, there is no right answer, you can still make the arguments. So stability, well, look, let's take a look at a couple of things here. We can increase marketing and distributional capabilities. And the companies, and this is, I think, a big one, the companies that have succeeded increase their profits dramatically. And so really, even though that's talking about profits, if we increase profits dramatically, then even though it's a little riskier in the short term, then it's actually going to give us stability in the long run. And so I think there is an argument to be made. Here, let me look here, cons for profit, marketing investment. This is Anastasia. Marketing investments costs a new market, compliance costs too much upfront. And that is cons for profit. Yes, so there are all these costs that are going to go on associated with expanding here. Jonathan is saying, oh, I see we have lots of business people here. Timothy is saying debt financing is cheaper than equity financing. Jonathan is saying it depends on how much debt the company is leveraged, but you can still capitalize regarding profits. Well, yeah. So we're going to put that risk on someone else, right? We're going to borrow money. We're going to put that risk on someone else. So this could be not as risky as it seems, maybe. Because we're borrowing. All right, cons when it comes to stability. This one I think is really easy. They tell us that a greater number have tried and failed, suffering severe financial consequences. BLZ is not well known outside its home area. Con is we're taking on debt, and that doesn't make you stable, even though you can sometimes restructure, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be in business at the end of the day. Debt is still very risky. So you're going to take on a lot of debt. Most have failed that have tried this. That is a big, big problem. So I think we've got some pros, we've got some cons. The national plan, I know as we were going through it, everybody was down on the national plan, high risk, high reward. But let's talk about the regional plan. And so maybe since my interface is not working here as well as possible. Why don't we just mostly do this in the chat box? If you want to type into the chat box the answers, I'll try to keep up with it. So regional plan. Why would the regional plan, and this is where the regional plan is harder to make, why would the regional plan actually be better on profits? You tell me, what would be better about it when it comes to profits? Yeah, I see keep staff costs down. So in that other plan, if we're making a lot more money, but if we make twice as much money and our costs are 5 times as much in the national plan, then that might not actually be good for profits. Here, our costs might be much lower, and so even if the amount of money, our revenue coming in is not that much, it might still increase profits better. I see we have a history. This has already worked in one store. We can increase the prices on our products. Prices go up. I see Alexandria, slow and steady wins the race. Yeah. This is steady profits. So even if it's not that minuscule chance for a windfall, then we still might make more profits anyway. All right, so I see Anastasia talking about how we're investing in better product quality and services. As if a product performs better, customers will return. So I think this is going to get us some return customers. All right, it looks like we're able to make some good arguments here. Now let's talk about the cons of the regional plan. Why is the regional plan bad when it comes to profits? Let's just take a look back at it. These upgrades would generally increase the prices that BLZ charges. Yeah, I'm worried about, it seems good from the point of view of the person charging that, yeah, we can charge higher prices, but I'm always worried about that. Are you going to drive people away by charging higher prices? Who knows? And I see Brandy is saying, yeah, increased prices can make your loyal customers no longer loyal. Well, that's a problem. Timothy says we get no benefits for financing by using our cash. Yeah, so we're using our own money, not somebody else's money. Maybe that's good for stability, but maybe we would rather, especially with, right now I think interest rates are at 0 or below 0, we should be borrowing. Maybe we shouldn't be using our reserves of cash. Maybe that's a bad idea. So here, maybe we should use debt. All right, so even though everybody was in love with the regional plan to begin with, it looks like maybe we have a couple of reasons not to like it so much. Now let's talk about stability. I think we've got some good facts for each of these. So stability. Why is our regional, now you're getting out of my expertise here, Jonathan, stock buybacks to negate the loss of cash reserves? That sounds very complicated. All right, so why is this going to make us less stable? This regional plan. It really seems like it's a stable plan. But is there any argument that can be made? Well, I see Michael is saying we will still be playing only regionally and won't exploit the national population. Possible oversaturation of market. Yeah, so, well, was I talking about the pros? I guess I should have been talking, well, I think we're talking about the cons. So the cons of stability, I don't know why I skipped over pros, but let's talk about the cons of stability here, because I think this is the hard argument to make. But I see some good arguments being made here, which is that basically we're going to miss out on the national market. we might oversaturate our own market. Maybe there's just nowhere else for us to grow here. Sure. Cash reserves are a good thing in case something like this we're talking about COVID, so we should have cash reserves. But yeah, here we're going to be using our cash reserves. Should we really do that? Maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe it's a better idea to play with other people's money than it is to play with our own money. We have a lower profit margin, and that's a bad on the cons on profit, but I think it's also maybe bad here. Maybe we have a lower profit margin. We were talking about how that national plan could blow us up, make us rich beyond our wildest dreams. Well, maybe here, we're just going to stagnate and eventually we'll fall to pieces. So let's talk about the pros with regard to stability. I know I missed that. I see pros. Willie is ahead of me. Long-term relationships within the market, vendors, etc. So we already have relationships here. We don't have to worry about expanding out and finding new vendors and stuff like that. How about anything else? Stability? No debt. That's helpful. Let's just take a look back here. I see a couple of things that are good here. The local population is growing. We have strong customer loyalty. So the population is growing. I think that's good, not just for this. And sometimes you can use the same fact for two of the arguments. But I think the fact that the population is growing is good for profits too. Even if we don't go anywhere, our customer base is getting bigger. All right. So I see a lot here. Now, here's what we're going to do. Before we talk about how you would answer this, we're going to vote. Obviously, on test day, you will just be arguing with yourself over which is better, regional or national. So I'm going to do this in a very unscientific way. I'm just going to ask you guys, just type into the chat box, which do you want, national, regional? I'll try to count them up and then we'll go with it. Oh my gosh, this is hard. I think national might be winning. You know what? Because I think national is the harder argument to make and it looks like we're about even, I think we should go with national. Let's make the argument for the national plan. And so let me just show you what your outline should look like. You should write probably a 5-paragraph essay. And paragraphs 1 and paragraph 5 are more or less the same thing. And it's just the argument summed up. When you go to law school, or when you're writing, well, actually when you're writing a memo for your legal writing class, or also when you're writing a memo at a law firm, a lot of times you'll write a memo to help educate the partners, especially if you're starting out, you're a junior associate. You write a memo to help the partners understand the law. And the memo itself might be 20 pages long, but you have to condense the argument into just a few paragraphs. And so I think the way that is best to start one of these is to start with a brief answer, where you present just the very strongest arguments for your position and the very strongest arguments against your position. And so that paragraph would look something like this. You'd say something like, BLZ should adopt the national plan, which will better serve it in its twin goals of increasing profits and increasing stability. Because the national plan will increase profits, and let's just take a look at why it does that better. Because it lowers prices and there is a dramatic history of success. It is also better on stability because we will be increasing profits dramatically, and it's not as risky as using up our own cash reserves. That's why the other plan, the regional plan, is actually worse on both of these. The regional plan, and now we're looking at the cons, the regional plan won't help us increase profits very much because we'll have to increase our prices, and it won't help us with stability because we're using up our cash reserves to do it. So those, I think, are the best arguments on both of those. So that's your first paragraph, the brief answer. Your next paragraph should be the strongest arguments for your position. So what we're going to do is we're going to go make the strongest arguments, the strongest pro arguments on both of those criteria regarding the national plan. And so I know I didn't write too much down here. We can look back again and say, look, the national plan is the best plan for a number of reasons. First of all, this plan has worked for many other companies and has shown to increase profits dramatically. We have been able to expand in our own market. We have a good name in our own market. And because we have a good name in our own market, all we have to do is to replicate that process on a national scale, and we can increase our profits dramatically. This can be done over a short period of time. We will be able to offer lower prices because of our greater buying power, which will make it easier to increase profits and also easier to attract customers for that very reason. Even though it might seem risky, the national plan will actually help ensure long-term financial stability better, because having a profitable company will allow us to pay off those debts quickly and to continue to expand and to continue to make profits. What else would I say here? Even though we would have to increase staff, we would have national marketing and distribution capabilities. And so we could tap into a national market, which is much, much different than tapping into a regional market. So I think those are all the best arguments for our position. In paragraph 3, you would make some weaker arguments for your position and address the cons of your position. So let's just take a look at how we would do that. I think we've made most of the arguments. The weaker arguments of our position, let's see. I don't know so much about that, but we can definitely address the cons of our argument. And I think this is very important, and this is something that you're going to do as a lawyer. You're going to have to neutralize attacks on you. And so here are the things that we decided were a problem. We're not well known. This has not worked out well for other companies in the past. And so let's address that with regard to profitability. Well, we're not well known. However, we are well known in our home region. And so we know how to market ourselves already. And so we can use that experience and build upon it to reach a national market. Even though a greater number have tried and failed, and obviously they are not making profits if they're trying and failing, we know how to do this. And a lot of those other companies probably expanded beyond their time, but we are well known within our market, and it is time for a company like ours to expand. Even though we would incur considerable debt right now, and again, this is making a reasonable inference, right now interest rates are low and it is easy to borrow. And so if there is a time to do something like this, then the time is now. That's pretty good for that. Your last substantive paragraph is the really fun paragraph. That's where you just hammer the other position and show why it is bad. And so that's where we're just trotting out all of these cons here. We say, look, the regional plan, you've got to increase prices. That's going to ruin customer loyalty. And so when you're talking about profits, well, maybe our profits are going to go down if we're increasing prices. Maybe we should be using debt at a time like this instead of eating up our cash reserves. And by the way, eating up our cash reserves is going to really hurt us when it comes to being financially stable. If bad things happen and we don't have cash reserves, then are we going to be able to borrow? Maybe not, but right now we can borrow and hold on to our cash reserves if we're doing the national plan instead. It's entirely possible that we've already grown as far as we can grow in our market. And so we'll just be stagnating and we actually won't be financially stable over the long run unless we grow, because you have to grow to succeed. So that, I think, is how paragraph 4 would look. And then finally, you would want to wrap it up. And again, you're just saying, for all the reasons stated above, maybe state your best arguments, state your best arguments again. For all the reasons stated above, BLZ will be better served in its dual quest to increase profits and ensure long-term stability by adopting the national plan. And again, I think you have to look at the exercise as an exercise in making arguments. So even if, and I think maybe if any of us were the lawyer for BLZ, we would say no, do the regional plan, but we can make arguments for the national plan. And that is what you are being tested on your ability to do. Can you make arguments? And I think we have tried. All right, so thank you guys for helping me out with this stuff. That was very helpful. I'm going to tell you in just a second, just a little bit about LSATMax and how we can help you with this. We do have a unit in our course about the writing sample, so you can get some extra practice with the writing sample, which is very helpful. So let me just tell you a little bit about our packages. First of all, there are payment plans for any one of these. Studying for the LSAT is not cheap, we know that, and especially in tough financial times, you want something that's affordable. So we want to help you study for the LSAT, and we want to be able to help you in a way that's manageable for you. Also, you can download the app either at the Google Play Store or at the App Store, and you can take the June 2007 LSAT without any cost, and you can take a look at what LSATMax has to offer. So feel free to do that. I just want to point out how our course works. You start out with instant lifetime access. It can take a while to study for the LSAT. So when you're studying for the LSAT, you're gonna tell us what tests you're studying for. We're gonna give you a calendar that starts about 4 months out. I think it takes about 180 hours total to prepare for the LSAT to do it right, starting from the beginning. And that often takes students around 4 months. So we're not trying to get you on a payment plan where you just pay month after month, and anybody who's telling you that you can study for the LSAT in 2 weeks is not telling you the truth. So come on in, be part of the LSATMax family with instant lifetime access. You'll work your way through 100+ hours of lesson videos. All of the students studying for the same exam are working their way through the calendar at the same time. So you're studying alongside other people, working through these lessons. There are lots of drills and flashcards and homework that go along with each lesson. Each question has a real-time message board appended to it. So if you're struggling with the question, you can ask a question about it and an instructor will chime in and answer your question. Students also talk to each other on these message boards, so it's helpful to not feel like you're at home alone studying. There's personalized support. Reach out to us. Whatever your question is, we'll do our best to get it answered. And again, it's lifetime access, so this personalized support goes on until you're done studying for the LSAT. A couple of other things. We have a digital LSAT simulator. It looks just like the interface that you'll use on test day. You don't want to learn that on test day. You want to be able to use it well before you get there. We're always tracking your performance, which is especially important toward the end of the course, so you can study effectively and efficiently, know what your strengths and weaknesses are. And we have a higher score guarantee. If you do not beat your initial diagnostic exam score on test day, we will give you your money back. So please sign up, or at the very least tune in at all of our presentations that we give, and tune in at the legal level, which is our podcast. And with that, I'm going to answer the questions in the question and answer box. And you can put more questions in there if you like. Should I retake my writing sample if I retake the LSAT? Also, if my second LSAT score is significantly higher than my first, would that make me want to redo my writing sample as well? I don't think you have to. I think if you're satisfied with your writing sample, that writing sample is going to go on. I don't think you have to take the writing sample again. So I would not worry about it. I don't think you need like one writing sample for each LSAT. I think that should be fine. Is there an average length for the writing sample? Don't want too little or too much. What I would say is write the arguments that you think will be successful in that structure that we gave. Do it in an economical way. Don't be too wordy about it, and then be done. So I don't know that there's like a word count that you should be thinking about, but I think you should make your arguments. I think you should make them cogently if you can, and I think you should get out. It's 35 minutes for all of this, to read it, to do your analysis, and to write it. And so you're probably not going to end up writing that much anyway. Where could we access past writing samples of the LSAT? Well, if you take the LSATMax course, we have some. I'm not sure where else you could get those. I don't know that LSAC just gives them away. They might sell books of them. I don't know. If I do multiple writing samples, can I delete, erase a previous one? I don't actually know the answer to that question, but I doubt it. I'm guessing they're going to just get the writing samples, because it's the same thing unless you cancel your score, which comes beforehand. All of your scores go to the schools. And so I would imagine all of your writing samples will go to the schools as well. But I don't actually know the answer to that question. How much latitude are we allowed for inferences insofar as what is considered reasonable variables? Well, I mean, that's kind of hard to quantify. I think it has to be something that is more likely than not to happen given what's going on in that fact pattern. So like that example that I was giving you, that my student had talked about how the person in that other fact pattern shouldn't do an international tour because she might die in a plane crash. Well, that's a very unlikely thing to happen. So I think if it's likely to happen, sure. If you can't say that it's likely to happen, then I would say no. Is the writing sample timed? Yes, it is 35 minutes, just like the other sections. How much time should you allocate to creating the pros and cons? I would give myself maybe 15 minutes of preparation and 20 minutes of writing. You may not need that much though. So I would say 10 to 15 minutes of preparation, 20 to 25 minutes of writing, something like that. Can we use a fact in the national plan description about competition from chain stores as a con about the regional plan? Yes, I think you should. Those facts are all in the same fact pattern. And so even though you would be using the regional plan, I think you can take facts about the business environment from the national plan and use them. And I think that's a good idea. What time are the weekly office hours? It actually varies. And a lot of times there's more than just one office hours per week. When I do office hours, I usually do them around noon. I think tomorrow I have one at 1. But it depends on the instructors. Sometimes they're at night, so they're different. All right, do we need to use references on the writing if we use real life examples? Oh, I mean, I guess you can talk about what you know from real life, but I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about a particular business that you know has succeeded in a certain way, then I don't know that you need to use references, but I would say the name of the business. I would be careful about that. I think you can make reasonable inferences from the information in the fact pattern, bringing in outside knowledge, especially a specific instance. I don't know how great an idea that is. Do you recommend taking the 2007 free LSAT to have a baseline to study for the course? Yes, I think it's a good idea to take a practice exam to get a baseline and to also just get an overall view of what is tested on the LSAT. Yeah. Are the prep tests able to be taken in the LSAT-flex version like the diagnostic was, or only the full-length exams? Every single exam in the history of the LSAT, there's 90 of them now. If you sign up for LSATMax, you can take every single one of them in LSAT-flex mode. 3 sections, and we will score it like an LSAT-flex would be scored. If you are allotting 4 hours a day with a course like this to study, do you recommend taking LSAT in 45 days? Is too soon since you said 180 hours is requested? Well, I would say 180 hours is what it is going to take probably as a minimum to study for the LSAT. And I mean, you could sign up for an LSAT that is available in 45 days. I don't even know if that's, I guess you're talking about the August LSAT, if it's still available to take. I mean, it's possible, yes, I think in 45 days, if you're studying that much, to be prepared. But what I would say is that it's different for everyone. And so I think that's what it takes to study completely, but it may take more if you need more review or if you're looking for a larger score increase. And so I don't think it's too soon, but studying in 45 days is a very compacted study schedule, I guess is what I would say. I'm sorry if that's not an answer to your question, but 45 days seems like not a lot to study for the LSAT, just in general. Because you have to internalize the concepts as well. It's not just, I have spent these hours and now I'm done. I hope that answered the question. I kind of feel like it did not. That is the last question. Any more questions you want to type into the Q&A box? I'm happy to answer them. If not, I'm going to let you all go. Alrighty, thank you guys so much. Best of luck on your studies. Hopefully I will see some of you in the LSATMax system, maybe at office hours sometime soon. But regardless, good luck studying, stay safe, stay healthy. And now I have a question. Ashley asks, how long does average students study for the LSAT? Well, to study completely and to follow the LSATMax calendar takes about 4 months. And I would say you should plan on spending at least 4 months. All right, now the questions are answered. I'm gonna let you all go. Take care, be well.